The martial arts legend thought it was a routine traffic stop. Then the officer's hand moved to his gun, and Steven Seagal realized this wasn't about traffic violations, it was about respect. The California desert stretched endlessly under the blazing afternoon sun as Steven Seagal's black Escalade cruised down Highway 14. His weathered hands gripped the steering wheel with practiced ease, his distinctive goatee catching the light filtering through the windshield. After 12 grueling hours on set filming his latest action thriller, exhaustion weighed heavily on his broad shoulders, but his driving remained impeccable. 62 mph in a 65 zone. Clean record. No violations. The sudden eruption of red and blue lights in his rearview mirror shattered the desert's tranquility like a sledgehammer through glass. Seagal's dark eyes narrowed in the mirror, confusion flickering across his features. His calloused fingers drummed once against the steering wheel before he smoothly guided the SUV onto the dusty shoulder, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Officer Marcus Rivera emerged from the patrol car with the swagger of a man drunk on his own authority. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming, but something in his movements screamed unprofessionalism. His hand already hovered near his service weapon as he approached, bypassing every courtesy protocol taught at the academy. "License and registration," Rivera barked, his voice cutting through the desert air like a rusty blade. No greeting. No explanation. Just raw, demanding authority. Seagal rolled down his window, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Good afternoon, officer," he replied, his voice carrying that distinctive low rumble that had intimidated countless movie villains. "Mind telling me what this is about?" The question hung in the superheated air, ignored completely. "I said license and registration," Rivera repeated, his tone sharper now, more aggressive. His eyes were hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, but tension radiated from his entire frame. Suppressing the flicker of irritation that threatened to surface, Seagal reached slowly for his wallet, every movement telegraphed and deliberate. Years of martial arts training had taught him the value of controlled responses, especially when facing unpredictable aggression. He extracted his California driver's license, and beside it, his Screen Actors Guild card identifying him as Steven Seagal, actor and producer. Rivera snatched the documents, barely glancing at them before his lip curled into something resembling a sneer. Steven Seagal, huh? The name dripped from his mouth like poison. The tough guy actor. "That's right," Seagal confirmed, his patience wearing thin like rope under tension. "Now, can you please explain why I'm being stopped?" "I wasn't speeding, wasn't weaving, my registration's current." "Step out of the vehicle." The command hit like a physical blow. Seagal's hand stilled on the steering wheel, his mind processing the complete violation of protocol he was witnessing. This wasn't a traffic stop anymore. This was something else entirely. Something personal. "Excuse me, officer." Seagal's voice dropped an octave, carrying decades of authority from both Hollywood sets and dojo floors. Rivera's hand moved closer to his weapon, the gesture unmistakable and deliberate. "You heard me, movie star. Step out of the car. Now." The desert wind whistled through the open window, carrying with it the weight of a moment balanced on a knife's edge. Seagal's eyes remained fixed on Rivera's face, reading the micro-expressions, the body language, the clear signs of a man whose ego had been bruised by something far beyond this encounter. This wasn't about traffic violations or public safety. This was about power, respect, and a badge being used as a weapon against perceived slights. "On what probable cause, officer?" Seagal asked, his voice steady as granite. Rivera's jaw tightened at the question, his authority being challenged by someone who clearly understood their rights. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on both men, but the real heat was building in the space between them, crackling with unspoken threats and mounting tension. "I don't need to explain myself to some washed-up actor," Rivera snarled, his professional mask slipping completely. "When I give an order, you follow it. Period." Seagal remained seated, his hands visible on the steering wheel, every instinct screaming danger. 40 years of martial arts had taught him to read violent intent, and every fiber of Rivera's being radiated it. But Seagal also knew that one wrong move, one perceived threat, could turn this encounter deadly. "Officer Rivera," Seagal said, reading the nameplate on the man's chest, "I've complied with your requests. I've shown you my identification. But I'm not stepping out of this vehicle without probable cause. If there's an issue here, let's call your supervisor." "I don't need a damn supervisor." Rivera exploded, spittle flying from his lips. "And I sure as hell don't need some Hollywood has-been telling me how to do my job." The personal nature of the attack confirmed Seagal's suspicions. This wasn't random. Rivera had recognized him from the moment he'd approached the car, and something about Seagal's movies, his persona, or perhaps just his success had triggered a deep-seated resentment in the officer. "Officer, you're escalating this situation without cause," Seagal replied, his voice maintaining that eerily calm quality that had made him famous on screen. "I'm going to ask you to step back and reconsider your actions." Rivera's laugh was harsh and humorless, echoing across the empty desert like a coyote's howl. "You think you can intimidate me with that tough guy act? You think because you play a cop in movies, you know how real police work?" The officer's hand moved to rest directly on his service weapon's grip, the leather holster creaking in the silence. The sound sent ice through Seagal's veins despite the desert heat. This was escalating beyond verbal confrontation into genuinely dangerous territory. "I'm not trying to intimidate anyone," Seagal said carefully, his hands remaining perfectly still and visible. "I'm simply exercising my constitutional rights. You've provided no reason for this stop, no probable cause for asking me to exit my vehicle." "Your probable cause," Rivera hissed, leaning closer to the window, "is that I said so. You Hollywood types think you're above the law, think your money and fame make you untouchable. Well, not out here. Not on my highway." The smell of Rivera's cologne mixed with sweat and something else, fear, perhaps, or the metallic tang of adrenaline, filled the space between them. Seagal could see his own reflection in Rivera's mirrored sunglasses, could see how his calm demeanor was only infuriating the officer further. "Officer Rivera," Seagal said, switching tactics, trying to find some common ground, "I respect law enforcement. I've worked with police consultants on my films, I support." "Shut up!" Rivera roared, his composure finally shattering completely. "I don't want to hear about your movies or your fake respect. You make millions pretending to be what real men like me actually are." The officer's hand tightened on his weapon, knuckles white with tension. Seagal could see the man's chest rising and falling rapidly, could recognize the signs of someone whose rational mind was being overwhelmed by emotion and ego. "Officer, please," Seagal tried once more, "you're making a mistake here. Whatever issues you have with me personally, this isn't the way to handle them. Think about your career, your family. Don't you dare talk about my family." Rivera screamed, and in one fluid motion, he drew his service weapon, pointing it directly at Seagal's head through the open window. "Get out of the car now, or I swear to God, I'll make you." Time seemed to crystallize in that moment. The desert wind stopped. The distant hum of traffic faded. Even the sun seemed to pause in its relentless journey across the sky. Steven Seagal, who had faced down countless fictional villains, who had choreographed hundreds of fight scenes, who had built a career on projecting invincibility, found himself staring down the barrel of a very real gun held by a very unstable man. But even now, with death inches from his face, Seagal's voice remained steady. "Officer Rivera, you're pointing a weapon at an unarmed citizen without cause. You're being recorded by your own dash cam. Think very carefully about your next move." Rivera's breathing was ragged now, his finger hovering near the trigger, sweat beading on his forehead despite the sunglasses. The moment balanced on a razor's edge, one twitch away from tragedy. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap when salvation arrived from an unexpected source. The roar of a motorcycle engine cut through the desert silence, growing louder as it approached the scene. Rivera's head snapped toward the sound, his weapon still trained on Seagal but his attention momentarily divided. A sleek Harley-Davidson pulled onto the shoulder 50 yards behind Rivera's patrol car. The rider, a woman in her 30s with athletic build and determined movements, killed the engine and dismounted. Maria Santos, a fitness instructor from nearby Palmdale, had been heading home from a client session when she spotted the police stop. Something about the officer's aggressive posture had triggered her instincts. "Hey!" Maria's voice carried clearly across the desert air as she pulled out her smartphone. "I'm recording this." Rivera's head whipped around, his eyes wide behind the sunglasses. The gun in his hand wavered slightly as the reality of witnesses and documentation crashed into his rage-fueled tunnel vision. "Ma'am, move along. This is official police business." But Maria was already recording, her phone held steady as she captured the scene, a uniformed officer pointing his weapon at an unarmed man sitting calmly in his vehicle. "I can see exactly what kind of business this is, officer. The whole world's going to see it too." Seagal seized the moment, his voice cutting through Rivera's panic with surgical precision. "Officer Rivera, you now have a witness recording your actions. You're pointing a firearm at an unarmed citizen without cause. I strongly suggest you holster your weapon and step away from my vehicle." The authority in Seagal's voice had shifted. No longer was he the defensive citizen trying to de-escalate, now he was the predator who had spotted weakness in his opponent. Years of studying human psychology for his roles, combined with decades of martial arts philosophy, had taught him when to retreat and when to advance. Rivera's hand began to shake, the weight of his actions finally penetrating the red haze of his anger. The gun felt impossibly heavy now, his career flashing before his eyes. But his pride, his wounded ego, wouldn't let him back down completely. "Put that phone away," he screamed at Maria, his voice cracking with desperation. "This is a traffic stop. You're interfering with." "I'm documenting a crime," Maria shot back, her finger never leaving the record button. "And I'm staying right here until your supervisor arrives. This man hasn't moved, hasn't threatened you, hasn't done anything but ask reasonable questions. And you're pointing a gun at his head." The distant wail of sirens began to echo across the desert, growing steadily louder. Someone, perhaps Maria, perhaps a passing motorist, had called for backup. Rivera's face went pale as he realized the cavalry was coming, and it wasn't coming for him. "You called them?" Rivera demanded, spinning toward Maria, his weapon still drawn but no longer aimed directly at Seagal. "Damn right I did," Maria replied, her courage growing with each passing second. "Every second of this is going straight to social media, officer. Your badge number, your face, everything. The whole world's going to know what Steven Seagal went through today." The name recognition hit Rivera like a slap. In his rage, he'd almost forgotten he was threatening one of Hollywood's most recognizable action stars. The implications crashed over him like a tsunami. This wasn't just going to be a complaint or an internal investigation. This was going to be national news. Seagal remained perfectly still in his seat, but his voice carried new authority. "Officer Rivera, backup is arriving. You have about 30 seconds to make the right choice here. Holster your weapon, step away from my vehicle, and we can all pretend this was a misunderstanding. Or you can keep that gun drawn when your colleagues arrive and try to explain why you're threatening an unarmed citizen." The sirens were getting closer now, maybe a mile away. Rivera's breathing was labored, sweat streaming down his face. His entire career, his pension, his family's future, everything balanced on the next few seconds. Maria's voice cut through his panic one more time. "Officer, the whole internet is watching you right now. Make the right choice." Rivera's hand trembled as the sirens grew deafeningly loud, his moment of decision arriving with the speed of desert lightning. 2 patrol cars screamed onto the scene in a cloud of dust and flashing lights, their sirens finally cutting off to leave only the desert wind and the sound of car doors slamming. Rivera spun toward the arriving officers, his weapon still drawn, his face a mask of panic and defiance. Captain Elena Torres emerged from the lead vehicle, her silver badge gleaming in the afternoon sun. 25 years on the force had given her an instinct for reading situations, and what she saw made her blood run cold. One of her officers pointing a service weapon at a civilian while a witness recorded everything on her phone. Rivera. Weapon down, now. Torres barked, her own hand moving to her sidearm as training kicked in. Officer David Chen emerged from the second patrol car, his eyes taking in the scene with growing horror. He'd responded to Rivera's initial call for backup, expecting a routine traffic stop. Instead, he found himself witnessing what looked like a career-ending nightmare. Rivera's head swiveled between his captain and the man in the Escalade, desperation making his voice crack. "Captain, this suspect was non-compliant, resistant to." "I said weapon down." Torres roared, her voice carrying the authority of 2 decades in command. "Now, Rivera." Slowly, his hands shaking, Rivera lowered his service weapon but didn't holster it. Sweat poured down his face as he tried to salvage some version of events that wouldn't end his career. "Captain, this individual was belligerent, refused to comply with lawful orders." "That's a lie." Maria's voice cut across the desert like a whip crack. She stepped closer, her phone still recording, capturing every word. "I watched the whole thing. This officer pulled a gun on an unarmed man for no reason." Torres's eyes snapped to the woman with the phone, then to the calm figure still seated in the Escalade. Recognition flickered across her features. "Sir, would you please step out of your vehicle slowly, hands visible?" Steven Seagal complied with deliberate, controlled movements, his hands raised and clearly visible as he emerged from the SUV. Standing at his full height, his imposing presence seemed to fill the desert landscape. His distinctive features and unmistakable bearing left no doubt about his identity. "Captain Torres," Seagal said, reading her nameplate, his voice carrying that famous gravelly tone, "I'm Steven Seagal. I was pulled over by Officer Rivera approximately 15 minutes ago for reasons that were never explained to me. When I asked for justification, he drew his weapon and threatened me." Torres's face went white. A Hollywood celebrity. Witnesses. Recording devices. This was about to become the kind of incident that ended careers and sparked federal investigations. "That's not what happened." Rivera protested, finally holstering his weapon with shaking hands. "He was belligerent, non-compliant. He refused direct orders." Maria stepped forward, her phone screen glowing with video evidence. "I have it all right here, Captain. Your officer drew his gun on an unarmed man who was sitting calmly in his car, hands visible, asking reasonable questions about why he was being stopped." Torres extended her hand. "Ma'am, I need to see that recording." As Maria began playing back the video, the sound of Rivera's voice filled the desert air. "Get out of the car now, or I swear to God, I'll make you." The footage clearly showed Seagal's hands on the steering wheel, his calm demeanor, his reasonable questions, and Rivera's escalating aggression culminating in drawing his weapon. Torres watched in silence, her jaw tightening with each passing second. When the video ended, she turned to Rivera with the look of someone whose worst nightmares had just come true. "Rivera, you're under arrest," she said quietly. "What?" Rivera's voice cracked with disbelief. "Captain, you can't be serious. He's just some actor." "I'm your officer." "You were my officer," Torres corrected, nodding to Chen. "Cuff him." Officer Chen approached his colleague with obvious reluctance, his own career suddenly feeling precarious. "Marcus, don't make this harder than it has to be. This is insane." Rivera protested as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You're going to arrest a cop for doing his job? For some Hollywood has-been? You drew your weapon on an unarmed citizen without probable cause." Torres cut him off, her voice ice-cold. "That's felony assault under color of authority. Chen, read him his rights." As Chen began the Miranda warning, Torres turned her attention to Officer Blake, who had remained silent throughout the encounter. "Officer Blake, you were first backup on scene. You stood there and watched this happen without intervening." Blake's face went ashen. Captain, I thought. You thought what? That it was acceptable to watch a fellow officer commit a felony? Torres's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You're suspended pending investigation. Turn in your badge and weapon. The desert wind picked up, swirling dust around the surreal scene of two officers being disciplined while their victim stood calmly watching, his bearded face impassive but his dark eyes missing nothing. Seagal approached Torres as Rivera was loaded into the back of Chen's patrol car. Captain, I want to press full charges. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate abuse of power. Torres nodded grimly. Mr. Seagal, you have my word that this will be investigated thoroughly. Rivera will face both criminal charges and departmental discipline. Maria stepped forward, still holding her phone. Captain, I'm posting this video online tonight. The public has a right to know what happened here. I understand, ma'am. And I want you to know that our department takes these incidents seriously. This is not representative of how we train our officers. As the patrol cars pulled away with Rivera in custody, the desert returned to its eternal silence. But Seagal knew this was just the beginning. Within 6 hours of Maria posting the video to social media, it had exploded across the internet like wildfire. The footage of a uniformed police officer drawing his weapon on the seated, calm Steven Seagal spread from platform to platform with viral intensity. Hashtag Steven Seagal traffic stop began trending worldwide, accompanied by thousands of comments ranging from outrage to support for the actor's composure under pressure. By midnight, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. By morning, it was approaching 10 million. News outlets across the country picked up the story, with CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC all running segments about the incident. The footage was undeniable, the abuse of power crystal clear, and the celebrity status of the victim ensured maximum exposure. Seagal's phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, talk show hosts, and his publicist. But the call that mattered most came from Maria at 7 a.m. the next morning. Steven, I've been getting messages all night, she said, her voice excited but determined. People sharing their own stories about police encounters. Some of them they're heartbreaking. A lot of people don't have your platform or your resources when this happens to them. Seagal listened as Maria described message after message from ordinary citizens who had faced similar situations without cameras, without witnesses, without the protection that fame provided. A construction worker in Bakersfield. A teacher in Fresno. A veteran in San Bernardino. All with stories of traffic stops that had escalated beyond reason, of officers who had let power corrupt their judgment. What are you thinking? Seagal asked, though he already knew where her mind was going. I'm thinking we don't let this moment pass, Maria replied. I'm thinking we use this attention for something bigger than just getting one bad cop fired. That afternoon, Seagal held a press conference outside the Palmdale Police Department. Reporters crowded around as he stood next to Maria, both of them flanked by community leaders and civil rights activists who had reached out after seeing the video. What happened to me yesterday wasn't unique, Seagal began, his distinctive voice carrying clearly over the crowd. The only thing unique about it was that it was recorded and that I'm fortunate enough to have a platform to speak about it. But across this country, every day, citizens are facing officers who have forgotten that the badge is meant to protect and serve, not intimidate and threaten. The press conference lasted an hour, with Seagal fielding questions about his experience while consistently redirecting attention to the broader issues of police accountability and citizen rights. When asked about his famous action hero persona, he was direct, in my movies, I play characters who fight back against injustice. But yesterday, the most important thing I could do was stay calm, follow the law, and trust that the system would work. Violence should always be the last resort, not the first. Maria took the microphone next, her voice steady despite the sea of cameras pointed at her. I was scared when I stopped to record, she admitted. I thought about just driving past, minding my own business. But I realized that if we all just drive past, if we all mind our own business when we see injustice, then nothing ever changes. Every person here has the power to make a difference just by paying attention, by speaking up, by holding people accountable. Within a week, the video had been viewed over 50 million times. Officer Rivera was formally charged with assault under color of authority, a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. Officer Blake was terminated for failure to intervene. The Palmdale Police Department announced a comprehensive review of their training procedures and use of force policies. But Seagal and Maria weren't content with individual justice. They organized a town hall meeting at the Palmdale Community Center, expecting maybe 50 people. Instead, over 300 citizens packed the room, with more gathering outside to listen through open windows. The meeting was unlike anything Seagal had experienced. Instead of the scripted world of Hollywood, this was raw, unfiltered human emotion. A young mother spoke about being pulled over while driving her sick child to the hospital. An elderly man described being handcuffed in his own driveway when police responded to a wrong address. A college student talked about being searched and questioned for fitting a description while walking home from class. "I've made a career out of playing heroes," Seagal told the crowd. "But the real heroes are sitting in this room. You're the people who get up every day, who work hard, who follow the laws, and who deserve to be treated with dignity and respect by the people sworn to protect you." The energy in the room was electric, but it was channeled into constructive action. Working groups formed to address specific issues: community policing, officer training, civilian oversight, and legal aid for those who had experienced police misconduct. Maria emerged as a natural leader, coordinating efforts between different groups and maintaining momentum. Seagal used his Hollywood connections to bring attention to their cause. He arranged for legal experts to speak at subsequent meetings, helped secure funding for community programs, and worked with local politicians to draft legislation requiring body cameras for all traffic stops and creating independent review boards for police misconduct complaints. The Seagal incident, as it became known in police reform circles, had become a catalyst for broader change. Other communities began organizing similar town halls, sharing strategies and resources. The video remained a powerful piece of evidence in discussions about police accountability, a clear example of how quickly routine interactions could escalate when officers prioritized ego over public safety. 3 months after the traffic stop, Rivera was sentenced to 18 months in prison and permanent disqualification from law enforcement. Blake remained unemployed, his law enforcement career effectively over. But more importantly, the Palmdale Police Department had implemented new training protocols, civilian oversight procedures, and community engagement programs that became models for other departments across California. 6 months after that scorching afternoon on Highway 14, Steven Seagal stood once again before a packed auditorium, but this time the venue was the California State Capitol. The Assembly Public Safety Committee was hearing testimony on the Police Accountability and Transparency Act, legislation directly inspired by the viral video that had changed everything. "Honorable committee members," Seagal began, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had served him so well in the desert, "I'm here not as an actor or a celebrity, but as a citizen who experienced firsthand how quickly our rights can be threatened when accountability systems fail." The committee listened intently as he recounted the incident, but Seagal's focus wasn't on the past, it was on the future. He spoke about the community programs that had emerged from that day, the training reforms that were already showing results, and the citizens who had found their voices through collective action. Maria sat in the front row, now serving as director of the Citizens Police Accountability Network, a non-profit organization that had grown from their first town hall meeting. Beside her sat dozens of community members who had become advocates for reform, their presence a testament to the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. "The real lesson from my experience," Seagal continued, "isn't about what happened to one person on one day. It's about what happens when communities come together, when citizens exercise their rights responsibly, when good officers are supported and bad officers are held accountable." The legislation passed committee by a unanimous vote, moving forward to become law. But Seagal knew that legal victories were just the beginning. Real change happened in the daily interactions between police and citizens, in the training academies where new officers learned their craft, in the community meetings where neighbors worked together to build trust. As he left the capital that day, Seagal reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a simple traffic stop. His action movies had entertained millions, but this real-life experience had the potential to improve actual lives, to protect actual rights, to create actual justice. The video of Officer Rivera drawing his weapon still lived on the internet, a permanent reminder of what could happen when power went unchecked. But it was accompanied now by dozens of other videos, community meetings, training sessions, success stories of improved police-citizen relations. The narrative had evolved from a single incident to a movement for positive change. For those who had followed the story from the beginning, the message was clear: change begins when ordinary people refuse to accept the unacceptable. It starts with someone brave enough to pull out a phone, to speak up, to stand witness. It continues when communities come together, when voices join in common cause, when citizens remember that in a democracy, they have both rights and responsibilities. The desert wind still blows along Highway 14, but the landscape of justice has shifted. And that shift began with two simple words: I'm recording this. Today, Maria's video has been viewed over 100 million times across all platforms. It's been translated into dozens of languages, studied in police academies, shown in law schools, and referenced in courtrooms across the nation. But more importantly, it's inspired countless other citizens to speak up, to record, to bear witness when they see injustice unfolding. The ripple effects continue to spread. The Palmdale model of community police collaboration has been adopted by over 200 municipalities nationwide. Officer training programs now include mandatory sessions on de-escalation and recognizing unconscious bias. Body cameras have become standard equipment for traffic stops in 37 states. Steven Seagal continues his Hollywood career, but he's added a new role to his resume: citizen advocate. He speaks regularly at police academies, not as a tough guy actor, but as someone who understands that real strength comes from restraint, that true power lies in protecting the vulnerable rather than intimidating them. His distinctive voice now carries a different kind of authority, the moral authority of someone who chose peace over violence when violence would have been easy. I could have fought back that day, he often tells trainees. My training, my experience, my physical capabilities, none of that would have made the situation better. Sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is stay calm, follow the law, and trust that justice will prevail. Maria Santos has become a national figure in police reform, but she remains grounded in the community work that started it all. The Citizens Police Accountability Network now operates in all 50 states, providing resources for citizens who encounter police misconduct and training for officers who want to serve their communities better. People ask me if I was scared that day, Maria reflects. Of course I was scared. But I was more scared of what would happen if I drove past, if I stayed silent, if I let fear make me complicit in injustice. The annual Highway 14 Memorial Walk has become a pilgrimage site for criminal justice reform advocates. Every year on the anniversary of the incident, hundreds of people walk the stretch of desert highway where it all began. They carry signs with the names of those who weren't as fortunate as Seagal, who didn't have cameras or witnesses or celebrity status to protect them. But they also carry hope. Stories of officers who've been inspired to change their approach, of departments that have embraced reform, of communities where trust has been rebuilt through dialogue and mutual respect. Officer Rivera served 14 months of his sentence before being released on parole. He now works at an auto repair shop in Nevada, his law enforcement career permanently behind him. In rare interviews, he admits that his actions that day were inexcusable, driven by personal resentment and professional frustration that had nothing to do with Steven Seagal. I let my ego destroy my career and endanger someone's life, Rivera said in a documentary about the incident. I hope other officers can learn from my mistake before it's too late. The story has become more than viral content, it's become a case study in how individual actions can spark systemic change. Law professors use it to teach about civil rights. Sociology students analyze it to understand how social media can amplify voices for justice. Communications scholars examine how authentic storytelling can cut through political noise to create meaningful dialogue. But perhaps the most important legacy is the simplest one: the reminder that every person has the power to make a difference. You don't need a badge or a title or a platform. You just need the courage to speak up when you see something wrong, to record when you witness injustice, to stand with others when they need support. The comment sections of Maria's original video, still active after all these months, have become a forum for people sharing their own stories of standing up for justice. Teachers describing how they protected students from bullying. Neighbors intervening in domestic disputes. Co-workers speaking up against discrimination. Citizens helping strangers in need. Each story adds to the larger narrative, that ordinary people doing extraordinary things can change the world, one interaction at a time. So here's the question for everyone watching: what will you do when you see injustice? Will you drive past, or will you stop? Will you stay silent, or will you speak up? Will you look away, or will you bear witness? The next chapter of this story isn't written yet. It's waiting for you to write it. Share your thoughts with respect for all perspectives in the comments below. How can we continue building bridges between communities and law enforcement? What role do citizens play in ensuring justice for all? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter, because change happens when we stay informed, stay engaged, and stay committed to the values that make our communities stronger. Remember, justice isn't a destination, it's a journey we take together. And it begins with each of us choosing to do what's right, even when, especially when, it's not easy. The desert remembers everything. Let it remember that we chose courage over comfort, action over apathy, and hope over fear. Your voice matters. Your actions matter. You matter. What's your story going to be?